Hello, welcome to Sophie & Co. I'm Sophie Shevardnadze. As the standoff in the east of Ukraine deteriorates into violence, it's falling to world powers to step in and calm things down. Tough talk from Washington notwithstanding, the US, EU, Russia and Ukraine have managed to reach a framework to peace in Geneva. But will it be enough to avert a civil war? Well, I'm asking the Russian foreign minister himself, Sergei Lavrov. Ladies and gentlemen, he's our guest today.
A civil war is looming in Ukraine. Blood is now being spilled in the east of the country, where locals are refusing to recognize Kiev's self-proclaimed government and are calling on Russia to step in. What can hold Ukraine together? Can bloodshed be averted? Who holds the keys to peace in this country?
Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, it's great to have you on our show today.
Thank you for the invitation.
All right, so just the other day, Joe Biden, on his visit to Kiev, said that time is short for Russia to make progress on its commitments made in Geneva. What is expected of Russia?
It's difficult to say, because I discuss this almost daily with John Kerry, and frankly, the American colleagues chose to put all the blame on Russia, including the origin of the conflict and including the steps which must be taken. They accuse us of having Russian troops, Russian agents in the east and south of Ukraine. They say that it is for the Russians only to give orders and the buildings illegally occupied would be liberated, and that it is for the Russians to make sure that the east and south of Ukraine stops putting forward the demands for federalization and referendum and so on and so forth. This is absolute, switching the goalposts, if you wish. In Geneva, we all agreed that there must be a reciprocal approach to any illegitimate action in Ukraine, be it in Kiev, be it in the west, be it in the east, be it in the south. And the people who started the process of illegitimate actions must step back first. It is absolutely abnormal due to any norms in a European city that Maidan is still occupied, that the buildings in Kiev are still occupied and in some other cities, that those who put on fire the buildings belonging to the Communist Party headquarters in Kiev, the buildings belonging to the trade union headquarters, are not even under investigation. I don't want even to mention the sniper cases, because everyone forgot about those snipers, and we only hear that let's concentrate on eliminating terrorist threat in the east and in the south. So in Geneva, we all agreed that there must be end of any violence. Next morning or next afternoon, Turchinov declared the state, almost a state of emergency, and ordered the army to shoot at the people if the people are engaged in peaceful protests. In Geneva, we agreed that there must be total rejection of extremists, and the right sector is still very active. And after Geneva, the right sector staged provocations, killing several people in the vicinity of Slavyansk during the Easter Sunday. So nothing which was agreed in Geneva, and which certainly is for the authorities in Kiev to start implementing, was done by them. Yes, they introduced a draft law on amnesty, but our reading of that law indicates that this is not for political prisoners. Yes, they announced a pause in the what they call counter-terrorist operation, but now that Joe Biden visited Kiev, this counter-terrorist operation was declared in the active phase again. Well, it's quite telling that they chose the moment of Vice President of the United States visit to announce the resumption of this operation, because the launching of this operation happened immediately after John Brennan's visit to Kiev. So I don't have any reasons not to believe that the Americans are running the show in a very close way.
Well, I know you have called on John Kerry to actually put pressure on government in Kiev and on its behavior, but does it really mean that you concede that America has decisive influence in the country?
I think this is absolutely the case. Not in the country, on the regime which took power in Kyiv. They have, I think, overwhelming influence. They act in much more open way, without any scruples, compared to Europeans. Europeans try to be a bit more subtle, and the fact that there's so many reports about the role of CIA in analyzing the situation and then being present in Ukraine, including the building of the Security Council of the Ukrainian state, occupying a floor. Then there were numerous reports which were revived recently. What was the role of the American embassy during the events in Maidan? Direct interaction and communication with the activists who were armed and who were planning the actions like storming the buildings and other illegal acts. All this has not been denied in the way which would be persuasive. And yes, when you get daily phone calls from John Kerry telling you, you must, and when you understand how many thousand kilometers the United States is away from Ukraine, and then you see how agitated they are about seeing their sponsored people not really delivering on the things which are obvious, then you cannot avoid the impression that they are running the show very much.
But what about Russia? I mean, I know Russia has reiterated many times that it doesn't recognize the legitimacy of the government in Kiev, but nevertheless, diplomatic meetings are held at high levels. I mean, in Geneva, I remember in Hague, you were meeting the interim foreign minister as well. Does Moscow has any leverage over Kiev?
Not over Kiev, no, not at all.
What about the east of Ukraine?
In the east, the people revolted after several months of total neglect of the interest. And when they saw what happened in Kyiv through Maidan, through the right sector, other extremists, the sniper fire killing dozens of people, then immediately all those who were against Yanukovych government were granted amnesty, which is not happening now to the people who just engage in political activities in the east and in the south. So yes, we see what was the reasons of the revolt in the east and in the south. They just don't want the repetition of what happened in Kyiv and what was attempted in Crimea, by the way. And these people, of course, they want to be friendly with Russia. They have many Russian relatives, and they listen very carefully to what Russia says. But these people are not puppets. And we cannot just guarantee that they would be ready to take for granted whatever promises they hear from Kyiv. They are fed up with words. They need real deeds. The regime must withdraw the order to use the army against the people. The regime must liberate political prisoners. They must start doing what they committed themselves to on 21st of February, signing an agreement which said, surrender illegal arms. They must start disarming the right sector. And they must stop just saying, we will invite the regions to a constitutional reform process. They must sit down with them. And instead of going abroad, I heard that Yatsenyuk is going to the Vatican. I think the better place for him to go would be south. When he went there a week ago, he only met with the people whom he himself appointed. He never got to the people who were protesting. And that's where the current authorities in Kyiv need to be now, if they really pretend to represent the entire country.
But here's the thing, people in the West, and I'm not even talking about the American political establishment, just regular people who watch TV. For them, what's going on in the south and the east of the country right now is very similar to what was going on in Maidan, because they see self-defense forces, like they were seeing the right sector in Maidan, chaos, people occupying the government buildings, not willing to put down arms. Now, they're saying, you know, these people are pro-Russian, so why Russia isn't so outraged at what's going on there? I mean, the chaos, like they were in the Maidan, and why don't they use their influence to calm them down?
Oh, no, I don't think we can say that we are negligent of their problems. We are in solidarity with them. We insist politically that their interests must be taken into account, and that's why we went to Geneva. That's why we negotiated the paper which demands an equal treatment of whoever is engaged in illegal activities, on the understanding that the government, the interim government, whatever they call themselves, must show the example, and they must stop the illegal things which continue to happen in Kyiv and in other parts of the country, not other than East and South. And yes, the East and the South, the leaders elected by the people said that we would be ready to surrender arms, to vacate the buildings, provided the government stops illegal orders to use the army and does what it committed itself to do with the right sector, other extremists, and with the buildings which have been taken over and still are occupied in Kyiv. You know what the Americans said, Victoria Nuland, I think, when we insisted on Geneva Agreement to be implemented in full, beginning with the liberation of the buildings in Kyiv. She said those buildings are occupied legally because the Kyiv authorities issued license to the people who occupied these buildings, and they are now legal owners, so legally present in those buildings. It's absolutely unbelievable that they can seriously put forward such arguments.
Mm-hmm. But so you're saying the agreement that was reached on the 21st of February by the Western powers was kind of ignored by those who signed it, but now you're saying the Geneva Agreement is also being ignored, basically. So what's the point of all this agreement if you can't come to a solution, a practical solution to do something?
The point of 21st of February agreement was to have Yanukovych sign up to commit himself not to use police, which he did. To commit himself not to declare the state of emergency, which he did. And basically that was an act of capitulation. Everything he committed himself to do has been done. People say that he didn't sign the law bringing back the previous constitution, but this law was promulgated anyway, so whatever was needed by the opposition was done. Whatever opposition committed itself to do, they never did. And the Geneva Agreement the Geneva meeting was actually designed to try to bring the process back on track, including the need to start a constitutional process with full involvement of all regions. And yes, the deal was struck, but it is not being honored by those who have to make the first step.
So they have to make the first step.
Absolutely.
Russia cannot pressure the self-defense forces to put down arms unless...
And we don't have any moral authority to pressure the East and the South to do something unilaterally in front of the army being ordered to go against them, in front of the right sector, who must have been disarmed long ago, and in the face of the political prisoners continue to be taken.
Mr. Foreign Minister, we are going to take a short break now. When we come back, we'll continue to talk to Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov about the ongoing crisis in Ukraine. Stay with us. And we're back with Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister here in Sofia & Co. You've also said many times that Russia has no intention of moving its troops inside Ukraine. Just recently, Dmitry Peskov, Russian president's press secretary, has confirmed that there is a military contingent that is reinforced on the Russian-Ukrainian border. There must be a worst-case scenario in which this contingent will be used.
If we are attacked, we would certainly respond. If our interests, legitimate interests, the interests of Russians, have been attacked directly, like they were in South Ossetia, for example, I don't see any other way but to respond in full accordance with international law. Russian citizens being attacked is an attack against the Russian Federation. The only thing I would like to highlight at this stage is that the Russian troops are on the Russian territory. The requests for inspections under the so-called Vienna document of 2011 and under the Treaty of the Open Sky, they all have been granted. The inspectors visited the areas of deployment of the troops participating in the training exercises. The planes overflight the areas of exercise, and no one who participated in the inspections, including the Americans, Ukrainians, and Europeans, ever brought up any fact which would indicate that Russia was engaged in some dangerous military activity. So we are on our territory, and we are doing nothing which is prohibited by any obligation of us. The Ukrainian troops are also on their territory, but the difference is the fact that they have the order from Turchinov to use weapons against civilians. And this is a criminal order.
But you've mentioned John Kerry many times during this interview, and it does seem like the two of you, regardless of the political differences, communicate and see each other more than you see your family members. Do you feel like on a personal level this is someone that you can come to an agreement with?
Well, we came to an agreement on Syria, we came to an agreement on Iran, we came to an agreement on Ukraine and Geneva on the 17th of April. Personally, we have very good chemistry. But we also understand that, you know, there are superiors, there are advisors, which sometimes doesn't help. But I told Kerry several times that we do not believe it is a real partnership, if they speak about partnership, when in fact whatever issue we discuss, they try to put the onus on us completely. And by the way, had it been not for Ukraine, there would be something else. Like it was Iran originally, when the Americans were saying, you must, if only Russia tells the Iranians, if only Russia doesn't sell weapons to Iranians, they would cry uncle and everything would be fine, this nuclear issue would be resolved. Then Syria happened. And they were telling us, they still do, if only Russia tells us that go, everything would fall into pieces, into place, democracy would prevail, and so on and so forth. So Iranian issue depends on Russia alone. Syria depends on Russia alone. They also say Russia and Iran. Now Ukraine depends entirely on Russia. It's an absolute, I would say, egoistic and unrealistic approach, and an attempt to hide your own responsibility. This is something. By the way, speaking of Syria, they said recently, and unfortunately the United Nations spokesman picked up the tune, the Americans said recently that the elections which have been announced for the 3rd of June by President Assad would be illegitimate because first there must be transitional governing order, transitional governing organ on the basis of a new constitution and so on and so forth. Okay, Geneva Agreement, Geneva Communique on Syria did say there must be transitional governing organ which would develop constitutional reform, and then on the basis of this reform there would be general elections. Fine. But the same sequence was mentioned in the agreement on Ukrainian crisis, signed on the 21st of February. First, the government of national consent, then the constitutional reform, and only after the new constitution is promulgated, elections. The people who staged the coup and toppled the legitimate president and took power, declared themselves government, they did not speak originally about the constitutional reform at all. They said there would be presidential elections on the 25th of May. And the constitutional reform, when we reminded them that this was the obligation, and unless they do this, the East and the South would not recognize the legitimacy of what is going on. Okay, they recalled this obligation, but said this would be done later. And the West believes that this is entirely legitimate.
So Russia is not going to recognize?
The same people who say that the Syrian presidential elections without constitutional reform would be legitimate are ready, not ready, they are accepting even today the legitimacy of the 25th of May presidential elections in Ukraine without any constitutional reform.
So you meet a lot of American politicians besides John Kerry, and the rhetoric from both sides is pretty harsh. Do you feel like the Americans are ready for a real confrontation with Russia over Ukraine?
Well, I already said that it is not about Ukraine. Ukraine is just one manifestation of the American unwillingness to yield in the geopolitical fight. Americans are not ready to admit that they cannot run the show in each and every part of the globe from Washington alone. They cannot impose their ready-made solutions on everyone. And they cannot understand that, I mean, they begin to understand, I think, but they still have the instincts that they shouldn't really take on board what others believe should be done. They're moving slowly. That's why, you know, we managed to make some compromises on Syrian chemical weapon, on Iranian nuclear program, the compromise on Ukraine and Geneva. But after a deal, they try to pocket whatever they got, and they try not to deliver what they promised to do. Maybe this is a natural manifestation of those who want, you know, to get the result, which would be in their interests. But on the Iranian nuclear issue, for example, the deal was very blunt, but as the deal started to be implemented, the Americans began to load it with new demands. Missile program of Iranians was never part of the discussion, never. And it was not part of the deal signed in Geneva last November. But as the deal of November started being implemented, the Americans threw in the missile proliferation problem, which could have, you know, derailed the process. On Syria, we signed a deal on the chemical disarmament of Syria, and the process has been going, still goes very well. Satisfactory assessment by the United Nations personnel participating in the process, by the Organization on Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, and so on and so forth. The Americans, almost from the very first day, started to, you know, ring alarm bell, saying that the government is dragging on this, it's not delivering on its commitments, and they were fully ignoring the facts, which were the need for the government to get more armored vehicles, which we and the Chinese were helping them, the need for the people who influence the armed extremists and jihadists to absolutely control them and not to allow them to stage provocations as the chemical weapons being moved, you know, from the storages to the port, and so on and so forth. So every time we sign a deal, the Americans start to put, you know, to put the blame for any delay on others, or even worse, they start to throw in new demands, which absolutely contradict the reached consensus. So that's what they're doing now on Geneva Agreement on Ukraine. But I do hope very much that they would act responsibly, and they would think not of the geopolitical initiatives, the geopolitical interests, unilateral interests, but they would think about the future of Ukraine, which is our biggest neighbor, closest neighbor, and the people of which are brothers and sisters to the Russian Federation population. So if we all think about Ukraine and not about who takes it, but about how the Ukrainians themselves want to live, then it shouldn't be very difficult to help the Ukrainians to find a national compromise and national reconciliation.
Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you.